Tonight's webinar is all about going solar. Many of us are now spending more time at home, which can mean we're using more energy during the day. When stage 4 restrictions are lifted in metropolitan Melbourne, which we all hope will be soon, solar installations will resume. So now is a great time to find out about solar and start comparing quotes. Yarra City Council has recently adopted its first climate emergency plan, and in it we've committed to achieving zero net emissions across the entire Yarra community by 2030. We've already started taking action to transition our organization and our community to renewable energy. Since last year, all council's electricity needs have been met by 100% renewable power through the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project. We joined with 14 partners, including other councils and universities, to enter a long-term power purchase agreement that drove the construction of a new wind farm near Ararat. We also have 2,920 solar panels, which is 740 kilowatts of generation capacity, installed on 38 council buildings, and 6 Tesla 2 batteries, 100 kilowatt hour storage capacities, installed in community facilities, including leisure centers, libraries, and sports pavilions. Our climate emergency plan also sets targets to increase the capacity of both residential and commercial solar installations across Yarra. That's why we've partnered with the Yarra Energy Foundation to deliver the Yarra Solar Program, to support residents and small businesses to go solar as part of transitioning the Yarra community to 100% renewable energy. Our speakers tonight are here to share practical advice with you about the Yarra Solar Program, how to choose a solar system, and how to get involved to help you start powering your home or small business with energy from the sun and saving on your energy bills. So with that, I'll hand over to Pete, who is our first speaker. Pete Mercurio is a senior project manager at the Yarra Energy Foundation. He has 10 years experience in energy efficiency, and solar. Pete's role at YEF, as a wearer of many hats, includes advising residents about solar, helping residents compare and understand solar quotes and electricity bills, offering advice on home energy efficiency, energy research, and managing the Yarra Solar Program. Over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Mel, and thank you for such a lovely introduction. Yeah, actually, Mel hit the nail on the head. Pete Mercurio here. Next slide, Sam, if that's all right. Thank you. So, Yarra Energy Foundation, we've been around since 2010, developed by the people of Yarra. We're an independent, not-for-profit, trying to engage and inspire people to take practical steps towards a zero-carbon future. So, Yarra City Council developed a climate emergency plan in consultation with YEF and the community, which reflects the community's vision. The Yarra Solar Program is a joint Yarra City Council and YEF program designed to respond to this climate emergency. Councils and YEF's target is to double residential rooftop solar in Yarra in 4 years and businesses by 50%. Currently, Yarra is about 9.9% rooftop solar penetration, with our national average at about 20%. So what we do quite a number of things, but one of my passions is assisting the most vulnerable members of our community. Last year, I assisted 400 people face-to-face, putting about $20,000 cumulatively back in their pockets just by understanding their bills. We helped coordinate the install of 90-odd kilowatts at Stomping Ground Brewery. Currently, we're looking at a similar size system at Collingwood College. And also through our solar commercial suppliers, we managed to organise a 5 kilowatt donation at the Collingwood Children's Farm for the 40th birthday last November. We also managed to get Carlton United Breweries to sign up to Sustainability Victoria's Take Two Pledge, which is if you don't know about the Take Two Pledge, have a look because there's some really great companies that have signed on to that. Next slide, please, Sam. Thank you. So our role in the program, essentially we act as the link between Yarra City Council, the solar provider Enviro Group, and you guys. Our role is to support you throughout the program and beyond. Through these programs and through the Yarra Solar Program specifically, we were able to negotiate a discounted rate of up to about 23% for top quality product with our partner Enviro Group. So we're here to ensure that participants receive the best service, quality and price for rooftop solar installations. Last year, our target was 100 homes and we just hit about 91 within 8 months until the old COVID hit, which resulted in about 400 kilowatts of solar. So as we're zeroing in as a small united front at the Yarra Energy Foundation of about 2 megawatts over the past 2 to 3 years through all our programs. The next 12 months with Enviro Group, we'd love to hit 200 homes and small businesses too. So why did we select Enviro Group? Well, they're a leader in this space. They've done some really, really great work over the years. We send out a competitive expression of interest. Within that expression of interest, there's over 60 points of criteria, of which Enviro Group met or went beyond in their responses. There's more than 100 solar providers out there in the market. So the aim of this expression of interest is to ensure that our community is working with an experienced, trusted, and reputable solar provider. Enviro Group have a strong history of successful community-led solar programs since 2004. Next slide, please, Sam. Thank you. So how will we support you through this program and beyond? Look, back at the end of the day, we're trying to keep these types of programs as simple and as transparent as possible. Heritage overlay, it is a factor in Yarra, but the main things to look for is if your panels can be seen from the street or a public park. Permits are required, and we have a bit of information on our website, so I'll direct you to that to have a read through, and happy to answer any questions after the webinar about that. I'd also really strongly encourage everyone to compare their retail offers, electric and gas, through this website. It's a government-run website. You know, there's those bills are becoming increasingly complicated. Recently, I saved a friend of mine about $400 over the year just by switching retailers. There's 30 more in the market at the moment. So yeah, feel free to give us a call or email if you need to sense check any of those retail offers. So that'll be great. And that's all from me for the time being. I didn't want to take up too much time because it's all in the meat of this program is with Enviro Group. So next slide, please, Sam. Thank you. So I'm just going to introduce Paul Blackman from Enviro Group. Paul's an absolute legend in the solar industry. He's been with Enviro Group for 10 years or so. Paul's been in the solar industry for quite a substantial amount of time. And he's seen the ups and downs of the industry over the years. And he's definitely a steadying influence within Enviro Group and outside of Enviro Group too. So without further ado, Paul, all yours, buddy.
Thank you, Peter. Can someone just confirm that you can hear me? Because with this Zoom thing, it's like talking in an isolation chamber.
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Paul.
Okay, great. Wonderful. All right. Well, welcome everybody. And thanks, Pete, and thanks for the team at Yarra City Council for having us along with the program and the presentation tonight. And apologies, like always, with Zoom, if my eyes flick around everywhere. I've got the phone to look at, which is not where the camera is, and I've got the camera here, and I've got my computer with the presentation down there. So it always looks a little bit scattered. So I'll be taking you through really quite briefly, I think, the details of our involvement in the program. The main message that I would like to convey to everybody as strongly as possible is that solar power is well and truly a force these days to be understood. The industry in Australia has been installing solar now for a good 15 years, and there's well over 2 million rooftops in Australia that have solar installed. So it's we are long past the days where solar is a speculative proposition. It 100% definitely saves you on your environmental contributions. It 100% definitely saves you quite a hefty or extreme amount on your power bills. And even though Enviro Group does a fantastic job of doing the installations, almost anything that you could choose out in the marketplace will more or less work and more or less do the job that it's supposed to. So the main message will be that if you have been humming and hawing about getting solar over the years, then now is really as good a time as any, and just make yourself comfortable with what's available and get solar installed. So look, we as a business have been doing solar since 2004, and that should be hopefully on the presentation in front of you. Is this? Can I just double check whether the presentation screen has been shared at the moment? I think I've got a few different views on my.
Paul, it is being shared.
All right, lovely. Thank you so much for that.
No worries at all.
All right, and I'll just yell out when we need to change the slide. So look, yeah, we are in my mind one of the good people. Our business was started by a chap called Mick Harris well into last decade as a genuine and bona fide environmental organisation, and we definitely have our hearts in the right place. And even though we started off as quite a quaint little environmental shop on High Street, Northcote, we've grown since then into one of the most significant solar installers in all of Victoria. Look, I'm not going to say we're one of the biggest. It was perhaps the case a few years ago that we were, but we've given up the idea of national solar domination and even state solar domination, and left that to some of the very big players. And so now we consider ourselves a specialist and very dedicated Melbourne greater area solar installer, where we take on a comfortable amount of installations per year and try very hard to do a very good high quality installation for anyone who needs one, without going crazy with volumes. That said, we're very able and fortunate to be able to take on the volume required with these bulk buys. We've just getting stuck into one city of Darebin at the moment, which is between 500 and 1,000 jobs. And so on the back of that, we've been fortunate enough to be granted this program as well with City of Yarra. So thank you. So next slide, I think. Just briefly, how solar and batteries work. Look, there's a lot of information around out there about this, and I won't focus on it too much. When or if you get some further information from us from the program, you'll get a bunch of information about this. But in general, solar power on your rooftop produces a large amount of electricity that runs down into your home's switchboard, and basically provides an injection of power relative to how strong the sun is into your home's switchboard, obviously all day, every day, to the strength that the sun is out. Now, from that point at your switchboard, what happens is that without any switches or without any smarts, the electricity then makes its own decision. It either flows into your home and your devices and powers those for free, or if there's not enough devices switched on at the time to soak up the solar, if you like, the excess then flows back out to the grid. And that all happens perfectly naturally, and all of the systems are in place, both technical and paperwork, for you as the consumer to automatically get paid a reasonably healthy amount for selling the solar back to the grid. It happens all day, every day. It happens especially when there's strong sun with not much usage at home. Everyone is curious about the rate that you get paid, and the backyard barbecue conversation is always that, oh, you don't get paid very much and you get ripped off. But in my mind, it's quite a generous payment. You get paid these days between half and a third of what your what your power costs otherwise are. And if you compare that to other environmental technologies, for example, like solar hot water, with a solar hot water system in the summer especially, you will have your hot water tank full of hot water and overflowing with hot water with no benefit to you for the second half of the day. Whereas with solar electricity, no single electron that is generated goes to waste. It'll either be used by your home or it will be sold back to the grid automatically, and you'll get paid for that, which is a fantastic arrangement. Now, people will always be asking these days about batteries too. Look, batteries is not the focus of this program. I mentioned before that the solar industry in Australia has been up and running for a good 15 years, and we've got everything down pat as far as panels, inverters, regulatory framework. Whereas with batteries, they are brand new still, in my mind. They've been around in reality for about 4 years, en masse in about, say, 2 years. But it's still the case that with our business, only 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 20 people get a battery. So they're still reasonably expensive. They don't necessarily save you heaps on your power bills. But looking at this diagram here, you can easily see how the battery fits into the equation. And the battery simply runs as an augmentation to your home's power supply, gets charged up for free for the most part by the sun. And when the sun goes down at the end of every day, the battery then kicks in and runs your home overnight. So you can achieve on an average day a zero consumption from the grid. But just note that because batteries are still quite expensive, you still will pay a fair chunk of money for that luxury. Next slide, please, if we may. We'll be offering a few, we'll be offering customized system sizes for this solar program, but in principle, the two main sizes that we'll offer, which will be relative to each person's bill, will be option number 1, which we're going to call 100% environmental, and that's quite simply, if you add up all of the energy that you use all year, then we'll put a solar system on for you that also will generate exactly that amount in that same year. On an annual graph, you can see how this works. The red lines here represent, for the most part, what some people's power bills would look like. That's people that have a decent amount of air conditioning and usually gas heating, so more in the summer, less in the winter, which corresponds roughly to the yellow line, which is what solar does on average. So you'll see that solar will still produce more than required in summer, less than required in winter. And the way that it interacts with your power bill is that this type of system here that is 100% environmental for your house will reduce your bills by about 2/3, right? So really important to know, an average sized solar system won't remove your power bill, not by a long shot. It'll reduce it down to about 1/3 of what it was. Usually you'll pay nothing at all in the better half of the year, and you'll pay still a decent amount in winter, and maybe even roughly the same in winter, because a lot of people's power consumption is focused in the evening when it's dark. Next slide, please. Now this is a similar graph, but you can see the solar line is much higher and much bigger. And I've just used a different model for a different person's home, showing slightly larger winter power consumption. This system here will produce annually 50% more electricity than that household needs. But you can see it's a lot more in winter, which will help a lot more with winter bills. The system will produce an excess quite markedly in summer. That'll all go back to the grid at a healthy rate of sale to the grid, meaning that on annual basis, these bills will be reduced by about 80%, which is fantastic. And to reword that for some mathematically challenged people out there, and they do exist, you'll only pay 20% of your existing power bill still, and that will roughly correspond to your service charges. So there's two options then that we'll try and quote you just to refresh. That's one we're calling 100% environmental, and the second one we're going to call future proof. The reason we say that, of course, well, not of course, but in case it's not clear, although some people's electricity bills are reducing over time with more efficient appliances, people are choosing to convert more of their home to full electric. People are choosing to get electric stoves and induction stove cookers. They're choosing to get electric heating instead of gas heating. They're choosing to get electric cars as well in some instances. And with gas heating and having that replaced with electric heating, it's the first time in human history really that we can get free solar powered heating, which is fantastic, right? It still is a large burden on the home electrically for that, but the saving grace there is that we are at a point in the industry where we can install large scale residential solar for not a lot of money that can give you roughly 100% of your heating bill powered as well. Now, if you want any other sizes through the Yarra solar program, of course we can do that. If you're on a strict and tight budget, we can do a nice little small system as cheap as possible. If your roof space has limitations or if you've got something specific, we're very, very glad to offer you any option of any size between or above or below what I've just mentioned. Next slide, please. A lot of words on this one. The quality aspects of our business, and there'll be some written stuff, of course, we can send to you, and you'll get it anyway once you register for the program. We'll send this out, and Yarra will send this to you. But look, there's 101 different quality markers in this industry. The very, very, very basic qualification is what people used to call Clean Energy Council approved, or rather accredited installer, which was a very, very, very basic level of accreditation. So much higher than that is what they call Clean Energy Council approved retailer. And although that's becoming almost compulsory these days, Enviro Group, I think, were the third or the fifth from memory to achieve that level of accreditation in Victoria, which we did at least 5 to 6 years ago. We were one of the first. If you look through the electrical and grid connection guidelines, which are called AS 3000 and AS 4777, those guidelines are many hundreds of pages long, and they're very detailed. And just because an installer might say that they do a compliant installation, there's many levels of grey area within that standard. And Enviro Group is well aware that there's a lot of areas where installations can be way better than just standard ones. And so that's one of our aims and one of the reasons that we as a business were awarded this program with City of Yarra and Yarra Energy Foundation. Next slide. About solar and your home, right? So a common question when a customer calls us is my home suitable for solar? The answer, I would say 99.5% of the time is yes, of course it is. All you need is a roof and some space, and it's suitable for solar. So long gone are the days where we need to bother too much about which direction your house faces or whether it's too shady or too difficult. Panels have come down now so much in price that in order to gain an annual contribution of solar, we used to slap on as many panels as required to do that, right? So we've got technologies that can span 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different roof faces. We've got technologies now that that can deal with significant shading. Although shade obviously is not good because sun doesn't work in the shade, but shade used to be an utter disaster in solar, and now it's fairly able to be mitigated. So we'll consider in every quote the space available and the shading characteristics of the home. For example, if your house is facing west or east, and a lot of houses in the inner city will have a north-south ridge line, which means their solar is going to be either west or east or both, then we know already that, for example, a west-facing roof has a 12% per annum loss attached to that relative to north. And so all we need to do is either factor in that 12% in your savings figures or install 12% more panels. And on a 10 or 11 panel system, that is just one extra panel. And so if you were thinking of 11 panels, we'll choose 12 panels, and then that western face has been counteracted and you've got exactly what you wanted. Meters and switchboards, especially in inner city Melbourne, where houses are likely to be a lot older, in some cases quite old and antiquated. The switchboard presents the major obstacle to getting solar installed efficiently and cost efficiently as well. So many switchboards are buried deep down in a house in the middle of the home, behind maybe a concrete or double brick or weatherboard set of walls. Internal switchboards in hallways, old plaster switchboards that only had an initial plan of 3 or 4 circuits on it, where now a house would need 12 circuits, for example. That probably is the main thing that gets in the way of a smooth installation. So I guess the key thing to understand there is, yes, absolutely, we can do the work, and it will work out for 99 out of 100 installs at least. But you'll need to understand that there can be or needs to be allowance there for electricians' work to be done on the board, and occasionally that does present a cost barrier for people. So a switchboard replacement from scratch can be anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800, $2,000, right? So that's quite heavy and intense work. There's a lot of switchboards, of course, that are completely fine. And if we see a normal style plastic modern switchboard with a cover on it that has a few spare slots in it, where the wiring channel from that up to the roof or to the inverter location is workable, then there'll be no extra charges from us to you for that. But it's a big point, because if you're thinking that you want to spend, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on solar, and then we come back and tell you that, well, hey, switchboard work is $1,600, that'll be an issue. But we're very upfront about that. We'll get a picture of your switchboard before we issue a quote, and we'll leave it to you to make that decision. And I guess it needs to be said too, we only ever do it when the switchboard is not compliant anymore. So anything from the 70s or earlier, usually the switchboards aren't compliant, and you could get any electrician at all that you liked to do that work. We don't feed off that work. We don't. We'd prefer ideally to not have to do it, I think. So if you have a friend who works at the local football club or something like that and can do a switchboard upgrade for you at mates rates or otherwise, then do that. Let us know. We'll come back when that's done and pop the solar in with no extra charge. Next slide, please. Oh, here we go. Here's some switchboard examples. So I won't spend too much time on that. The first one to the left, that's an externally mounted switchboard on a plaster wall in a hallway. You can just tell that, and it is full. So you can also tell that it's been worked on a bit in the past. There's 3 or 4 different types of switches in there. And the thing on the right-hand side is a residual current device, and that actually doesn't cover all of the switchboard. So even though that switchboard at the moment is deemed safe, we can't fit anything in there. So we need to put in one spare pole, what we call a one spare breaker switch as we call it. And if we can't fit it in, we need to work on the switchboard. We can add something to the left or the right of that as an extension if possible. But sometimes, and you can see the electricians do this work, if they pull apart that board and what's called the neutral bar behind that board, if that's full and nothing else can be mounted on that, then that switchboard is deemed basically it's done with and can't be worked on anymore. And we would need to replace that switchboard for you, which we're happy to do. That looks like a small board, and if anything, everything there is workable. Price on that something like $1,200. The middle one, so there you go. That's a modern switchboard. There is a total of looks like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 spare slots. And our electricians, when they see that, they will love that to bits. They'll just take open 2 screws, top and bottom, flip that board open. The whole thing will be exposed and readily worked on. And they'll pop their single switch in if it's a single phase connection, or a triple phase switch if it's a 3-phase connection. And they'll get that work done in probably 15 minutes. And that's what we're looking for. And so one reason that we're focusing on this in this presentation is that, for example, if we did work out in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, and a favourite place for installers to work would be out in Doreen, for example. No house existed there 20 years ago, and every single switchboard looks like this. Every single board has heaps of space. It's all ground level. It's all brick veneer. It's easy work. City of Yarra, it's quite the opposite. It can be always hard. Switchboard towards the right of the screen, another example. So it's a full switchboard, and you can see that there's just no space to do any work. If you look carefully towards the right-hand side, there's an extra little orange switch there. You can see that solar's been installed on that already. And if we need to come and put an extra solar system on, you can see, if you look carefully, there's a little white space next to that. That is usually presents an unknown to us. It's possible that everything fits lovely, and it's possibly not. And we still might need to do some work on that board. Next slide, please. Why install solar now? So I'll let you read most of that at your leisure, but in general, solar pricing to do with panels. So solar panel pricing within reason is cheaper than it has ever been in Australia, which is one reason. And the efficiency of panels and the quality of panels in general is the highest it's ever been. So the fact that you can buy a 330 watt panel from, or rather 370 now, from one of the most established solar companies in the world for a mere, I think market rate would be a mere $200 or $250 a panel, is absolutely amazing. So when I first started in this industry, one solar panel of only 180 watts or something was $2,000. Yeah. We've got some great state subsidies from Solar Victoria at the moment, which is an additional $1,850 off solar pricing. And that's quite unique. For many, many years there was no additional rebate, right? So that's something to not take for granted, right? That's really, really important to realise, and that brings solar pricing down more or less to as cheap as it possibly can be. And yes, solar subsidies do reduce every year. This is the federal government one. They're called STCs, and although it's not a major reduction, STC prices, or rather what's called the multiplier on the STCs, reduces every year. So if you can get in before the end of the year this year, you'll spend a bit less money than if it was next year. Mind you, it does need to be said that times are challenging at the moment, and this virus and the COVID and the lockdown is putting pressure on installation timeframes. I'm going to speed up a little bit, actually, just remembering that time allocated for this part of the presentation was only 20 minutes. We're getting into the bit where we're talking about product and product details, which we'll send to you, and we'll send them all out, and you get all of them, and everything, of course, that we're installing has been approved already by the City of Yarra, right? So it's all above board, and we can give you more information on that later on. Our basic offering.
Paul,
yes.
sorry, Paul,
Mel.
just to interrupt you for a
Yep.
moment. Just before you get into the details about the products and the panels, is it all right if we
Yep.
take some questions from the audience at this point?
Of course it is.
All
Gives
right,
me a
I'll
break
ask
from
you.
reading
Yes,
the slides.
that's right. And then we'll get right into the detail. So we've got some questions here. T asks, what about apartment blocks? Is solar suitable for apartments?
Well, of course it is. From a technical perspective, of course. Whenever there's a roof, we can put solar on it. The challenges are that you'll need body corporate approval for that, which is sometimes very easy, sometimes very hard. If you've got a strata title or something complicated, you don't necessarily own the roof that's on top of your head. So that needs to be managed. Another issue is that some of the apartment blocks are typical type of a singular block. I'm not sure what they call them. Might be triple story, double story, with no easy access around the sides. And so you might need quite a tall and robust scissor lift or something to get access to that roof. That can add about $700 a day to an installation. And then we've got to get the wiring back down again from that roof back down to where the switchboard is in the house, which could be all down the bottom. So the answer is always, well, usually yes. It just might cost a little bit of a surcharge there, which might then make it less attractive to you. But we've done many dozens of apartment blocks around the neighbourhood, so it's definitely doable.
And Jeff can also be there to guide you through that process, because it can be complicated. It's always good to have a champion in the building leading the way, but we've got a bunch of material that will set you on that path.
Great. Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Pete. Mitch asks, what's the average time to save as much as the cost of the solar system? Or in other words, what's a typical payback period?
Well, look, average from the quotes I've been producing recently, especially under the bulk programs, you're going to look at between 3 and 5 years. So that in historical terms is as short as it's ever been. It needs to be said at this point, people asking about returns on investment, you know, the range of product that there is out there, the range of system sizes, the range of how people use their energy, and also some of the complexities on a difficult home can see returns on investment in a year stretch out. I think the longest that we would see would be 8 years. I think I did a quote today for 8.5 years, right? 8.5, that's payback time. So that's if you're using the best panels available, right, which cost probably 3 times as much as the standard panels is in this program. If you've got a super complicated roof that requires a lot of extra work, maybe a 3-day install instead of 1, you'll get an 8-year return on investment. But then a smart accountant person will divide that number back into 100 and figure out that that is still, in simple terms, a 12% per annum return on investment on your capital on the worst performing system. So if you go back to the best performing option, say 4 years, that's a 25% return per annum on your money. So you spend 4,000, you save 1,000 a year, which is in most people's terms money for jam, compared to leaving your money in a home loan facility and getting 3.8%.
It's also it's also very dependent on how you change your behavior when you do have solar. For example, my dad got solar a few years ago. He started running the dishwasher and clothes washer during the day, set timers on his heating and cooling from 3 to 5. So his payback when he saw his quote was about 5 years, but it's been 3 years and he's pretty much paid it off. So yeah, it's a lot to do. A lot of environmental stuff is to do with behavior changes.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Paul. I'll ask one more question from the audience. T asks, is there a maximum limit in terms of kilowatt hours for the feed-in tariff per day? For example, say I installed panels which can produce 10 kilowatt hours a day and I only use 3 kilowatt hours. Can I basically feed in 7 kilowatt hours for that day?
Absolutely, 100%. There's no limit in any level. So you can put on as much as you like in order to do that. My solar system today produced 14.8 kilowatt hours, and I used about 3 of that because I wasn't really here. That's being here a little bit plus the fridge, and so I will have exported about 12 to 13 kilowatt hours today, and I'll get paid for every cent of that, and it will double in summer. So no, there's no limit. The only limit would be, because people do get confused with the terminology between kilowatts and kilowatt hours. There's limitations as to what size you are able to install, which is to do with city power and other things. But once that limit has been complied to, then it doesn't matter how well your panels work. You could buy space age panels that work the best known to humankind, and export a limitless amount to the grid and get paid for every cent of that.
Great. Thanks, Paul. I'll leave it at that for the Q&A for now and let you continue with your presentation, and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end.
Okay, great. So we're talking about some of the components now. And as I said, I won't talk too much about this. This is just taken off the spec sheets of the panels, and I'm a bit cynical about spec sheets anyway. You know, even the worst panel ever invented that ever got used anywhere had a great spec sheet and a great warranty on that sheet from a manufacturer who went out of business the year after they made the sheet and didn't tell the truth about what was on the sheet. So in summary though, the brand Trina, they're well and truly one of the most established solar panel companies on the face of the planet. They've been making panels for many decades now, but the real strength of this brand for us and for the industry is that they've been a constant presence as a brand and a manufacturer in Australia since the inception of the industry in mid last decade. And so there's probably no other brand that's done that. And what I mean by that is they were there at the start and they're still here now, which is really important. So most other brands that were there at the start aren't around anymore. There are some exceptions, but most aren't. And most panel brands that are around now have only been around in Australia for a couple of years or a few years or 10 years. And so I can't think of many other brands that have had the consistent presence that Trina has had. And the reason that we love that is that you have to make a good panel that gets a good reputation and that works well in order for that to be the truth. So this is not rocket science for us. This is the most tried and tested panel that we've ever used. It's on the roof of probably half of the installations we've done in the last 6 to 8 years. It's on the roof of every, I guess 95% of, but every council installation that we've done in cities of Yarra, Darebin, Moonee Ponds, Moreland, on the Brunswick Town Hall. There's 400 of these. On the North Melbourne Football Club, there's 800 of these. They're very common. They work very, very well, and they're a good choice. Next slide is Well, look, it's an upgrade to the Trina panels. So yes, I said the Trina panels were fantastic. In my mind, they're like buying a Toyota, right? Which is also fantastic. I've had a couple of Toyotas in my life and they're great. Thing is, they're not what everybody wants, right? So the Trina panels, they are made in China, and some people are expressing interest in products that are made elsewhere. So this brand Winnaco, they're well and truly a technical upgrade to that. They do cost more. They're made in Taiwan instead of China. And rather than being a cost-focused panel that's good, they're a quality-focused panel that costs a bit more money. So the tangible difference for the consumer is they've got a complete 25-year warranty with no exclusions in it, as opposed to your more standard type of warranty, which is a 25-year performance warranty. It's hard to articulate that sometimes with what's called a 10-year manufacturing defect warranty. So this part of the warranty is always hard to explain. Harder also because in reality, the solar panel market has only been around for 10 years. And that section of the warranty with your basic panels between 10 years and 25 hasn't been explored very much yet. But what we think is that if all your bits and pieces of the panel just fall off, right, and stop working, then that really is only a 10-year warranty for most products on the market, whereas some people are chasing a longer warranty than that. So these Winnaco panels, they've got drainage channels in them that let the water drain out better. They've got, I'll go to the next slide if I can. The next slide is again from the spec sheet of the Winnaco panel, showing or trying to articulate that even though most panels comply with international standards, you can buy panels that exceed international standards by factors of 3, 4, and 5. So that's well and truly in the realm of the consumer. If anyone feels like making a purchase for a little bit more money that's a little bit better, will last on average longer, then the Winnaco is a valid option. Next slide. Inverter. The standard inverter that we'll use for the program is a manufacturer called Sungrow out of China. They alternate between being the largest solar manufacturer on the planet, or maybe the second largest. I think Huawei are catching up to be the largest, but they flip-flop about that. But they've been around now for nearly a decade. They make 15% of the world's market, and even though they are considered a value inverter, nobody seriously thinks that they're markedly inferior, right? So I have one of these on my wall on my home. I chose that. I've got every expectation that it will last long enough to be worth its while and longer. That said, again, some people do prefer something made from a more, shall we say, prestigious manufacturer. Next slide, please. And the most common inverter that the industry in Australia has ever used over time, I think, is the brand SMA out of Germany. So when the solar industry first started, and I was working in it back in 2009, the Chinese had not yet started making panels or inverters, and you'd get laughed at if you suggested even using one. So the SMA inverters will cost roughly double the money. They should last, as far as statistics is concerned, they should last longer, but we don't give any super promises about that. You get a 10-year warranty with an SMA inverter. The Wi-Fi and the connectivity and the portal you get for your results will be smoother and nicer to use. But well and truly, it needs to be stressed that, again, it's a personal decision, and it's not something that we are going to bang on about and say you should get this because it's German. It's becoming less and less relevant these days. Next slide, please. The main premium inverter option that we've chosen to promote in this program is an entirely different technology called microinverters. Microinverters are one little inverter per panel. They're about the size of a book, maybe a bit smaller, and quite unashamedly, they are the most modern and the newest and the highest quality style of inverter technology on the market. So one little inverter per panel. Their main design criteria then is that it makes every single panel work individually from each other, and it's got a variety of benefits. So they will work better as a system with shade. They'll work better as a system over time with the inconsistencies in panels and debris and dirt on individual panels, making the whole system work less well. They are in theory safer because they use lower voltage AC power rather than higher voltage DC power. That's always a tricky point to talk about because it's not as if a normal system is unsafe per se. With 2 million of them installed in Australia, 2 million normal systems, it's not like they're all burning houses down. They're just not. But in theory, the Enphase microinverter system is a safer way to go. The monitoring is better. You'll get consumption monitoring of your house included in the system. And it has to be said, they're the most reliable inverter technology and brand that we've ever seen. So they've got a failure rate of something like 7 in 10,000, something like that. And they've got a 10-year warranty as well. So they're fantastic. So they're really applicable for houses with lots of different roof spaces as well, because the wiring's easier and difficult houses, they're a good option too. So, and you'll see in the slides later on that they are more expensive. Those coming into this program to get a really, really cheap price, the Enphase won't suit you. But those of you who have a little bit more money to spend, you'll see the Enphase is a great product and possibly well worth your while. Next slide. As far as how the program's going to work with installation intricacies and costs, yes, there are some super simple systems out there where we will clearly be sticking to the published pricing on the program, as we're compelled to do. Lots of installations are more complex than that. This one here, you can see, has 5 separate installation arrays to it. There's 3 at the front, 2 at the back, and one of them at least is facing a different direction to the other one. So that requires tilted frames that do cost more. It's got clip lock brackets on it, which straddle the ridges of this type of roof, multiple array charges, what we call extended DC interconnection. So all of that adds to system complexity, and that's the reason that we'll give you a customized quotation. Next slide, please. This one here, a nice little neat system with 3 panels, one facing one set facing east and one west. Something that no one really knows too much about before they get into solar is that 3 panels facing in one direction won't work with a normal inverter. The required voltage to get the inverter working isn't created with just 3 panels. So we have to then use a technology called microinverters that we mentioned before to handle this, because microinverters, just to remind you, is one little inverter per panel, and so they can handle the opposing faces on that. Next slide, please. Here's a fantastic example of a system that Enviro Group did several years ago. Nowhere near City of Yarra. This is in Blackburn. You can see here that the system has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sets of panels, and they're all partly in the shade. In fact, I can see a 7th bank of panels there. So that one there is a compulsory microinverter system. That's what micros were designed for, to handle all those separate patches of install, to handle the short arrays, to handle the patchy shade. So if anyone's got a house like that, who knows, there are houses that are up on Richmond Hill like that, they'll still qualify for the program, and we'll be using micro inverters for them. This one here, really, really easy installation. People on a budget will want to cross their fingers that their roof looks like this. One or two very straightforward and simple arrays lined across the roof, standard screws to install the panels into. You can imagine the installation crew being able to do this job very, very fast and very easily. Whereas if I can, we'll look at the slides maybe later on. If we can just flick our memories back to the previous slide, you can imagine working on that house. It's horrendous and scary work for an installer to work on a steep pitched tile roof, whereas a roof like this, very easy, very safe, very straightforward, and no extra charges. Next slide. Next slide shows a very similar type of a roof again with what's called clip lock clamps. Next slide, very quickly. And there's a close-up of what a clip lock clamp looks like. That's a very heavy aluminium clamp that clasps over the top of the ridge of the panels. They do cost extra too because they're heavy and solid aluminium. You need roughly two of those per panel. And it's designed for rooftops where there's no penetrations in them, and it will stop water leaking through the roof. Next slide. Okay, batteries. Now, batteries are certainly something that we welcome under this program, but batteries do cost a fair chunk of extra money, and batteries don't end up saving you as much on your power bills. So we gladly install a few brands. We've got the Enphase microinverter battery there, a Redback battery system in the middle, and the Tesla Powerwall, which we proudly install. We're licensed installers to that on the right. Battery options, just to really quickly summarize them for you, they are still expensive. You'll find that the return on investment for the chap asking earlier, how long does it take to save your money back on solar? And I said an average of, I said 3 to 5 years. Well, batteries, the minimum that we can really calculate on a battery return on investment is 8 years. And the average is probably more like 10 to 12, right? So if money and saving money effectively is your goal, batteries won't be the way to do it. That said, I think maybe 1 in 20 of our customers gets the battery, and they do it for other reasons, right? So they do it for just the logical fact that the battery will catch the excess solar during the day and power your house overnight. Good battery systems will also run your house independently from the grid too if there's a blackout. But you need a large and a good battery for that. Down the bottom of this slide, you can read some of the complexities that we're up against in installing batteries and some of the reasons that the pricing isn't coming down as much as people expect. Fireproofing and complicated switchboards are one reason, and the addition of bollards and things are another reason too. So even though the cost of the actual battery itself might be coming down over time, the government, to their credit, usually keep loading the industry with extra health and safety barriers that we need to contend with, and that pushes overall installation prices up and keeps pricing sort of steady over time. Next slide.
Paul, just letting you know, we got a few more questions from the audience that haven't yet been answered in the Q&A function, and so we'd love to ask them to you in about 5 minutes.
That's completely fine, always flexible.
Great.
I'm on using my phone for my Zoom, so I can't type and see the chat
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll ask you the questions.
Okay,
So
great.
if you want to continue on for the next 5 minutes and
Yep.
wrap up your presentation after that, and then we'll have
All good.
the next Q&A.
Lovely.
Great.
Okay then. All right. So the mainstay of what we're installing at the moment is an Australian-owned battery system technology called Redback. At this point, I'll just highlight that when people say that they might want batteries for their solar, what actually is the reality is that the battery is a smallish part of that component. What you'll end up getting is a battery system with a very large inverter and control system attached to that, with a monitoring system as well, and monitoring capabilities via Wi-Fi and a bunch of special electronics in there too. So that's all included in a good battery design and quote, but it's one of the reasons that it pushes the whole prospect up a little bit towards higher budgets, which we'll cover towards the end of the slide. Next slide, please. Okay, pricing. Oh, here we go. So Peter,
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you to see if you want to fill in the Enphase plus Trina section of the pricing here. I just noticed it's
We're still on the Redback slide. Maybe next slide.
pricing basic. Oh yeah. So
there you go.
next slide, we've got pricing for the solar systems there, which we had the Trina and Enphase ones in there earlier today.
Yep.
So
the ones.
So for those of you just watching this slide, this is the basic pricing template for the Yarra solar bulk buy. So you're looking at just over $3,000 for 3 kilowatts, just over $4,000 for 4 kilowatt, not so much extra for the 5, and a bit extra there for the 6. So the reason for that is that in all the 4 and the 5 and the 6 kilowatt systems, we're using the same inverter, which is a 5 kilowatt inverter. So they don't make a 4 and they don't make a 6, right? So all of this can be customized for you, but that there is your basic pricing template. And just to remind you, the reason that it's a bulk program is that we go out to our extensive list of suppliers and we say, hey, you know, we've got this bulk program, we're going to do maybe 200 systems through the city of Yarra, and we try and get the best pricing we can, right, for that in bulk. And so you're looking at pricing that is, in very genuine terms, about 23% less than what you would get from our business if you just rang us up on another day and just said how much is a such and such. And so it's a realistic, good value system. So the slide to the column there to the right is your upgrade price for Trina and Enphase, which we'll get to you either in another fashion, or I'll wait and see whether we can upload that slide to you. Next slide. So yeah, those were the base prices. If we can get away with doing the installation nice and easy, then you won't pay any more than that. There are some genuine areas though where solar installations do charge more. So every time we split an array up into different segments, especially when it traverses different parts of the roof, there's some pretty chunky and hefty wiring in that. So all those interconnections in DC, they're all high voltage, up to 600 volts. They require very heavy duty UV stable conduit for that, and what's called mechanical protection as well, and quite often a whole set of new isolators and DC isolators there. So we can't underestimate that sometimes. Steep roofs we can do, there's a surcharge on that. High roofs as well, and wiring protection behind some of the switchboards, especially ones that are internal. So an external switchboard, for example, on a brick wall where there is the inverter right next to that switchboard, There's no extras required there. So we'll always be very upfront with the quote. The quote that we give you will be detailed, have all these items on it. It will be quite transparent. But it's important to know that there's quite a range of legitimate extra costs that get incurred for difficult or non-standard installations. Next slide, please. Battery pricing. So you can see there straight away that battery pricing is or can for some people be challenging, right, upon first glance. It's basically a 1 added at the front to all the previous prices, right?
All this is on our website as well, Paul. So just in the interest of getting to those questions, I reckon.
Yep.
Next slide and
Cool.
Questions.
Alrighty. And very finally, then next steps. I think that'll be the last slide. That's really clear, and we'll send that out. But in general, this program is going to operate fairly normal and fairly personal. You call us up or you lodge your details with the City of Yarra or with the Yarra Energy Foundation. We'll then get in touch with you. We'll arrange a tailored quote based on your power bills and aerial images of your roof. We'll get you to send us some photos if you can of your switchboard. We'll arrange the quote. We'll instigate the process with Solar Victoria that gets you the rebate. You then need to apply for that yourselves, but you'll get that granted. And then basically we just come and install the solar when we can after the lockdown and after a small waited period, and away we go. And we arrange all the paperwork as well for connection to the grid, so that goes fairly easily. Last slide and end slide. I'll put that back to Peter.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Well, I actually might just move it across to just a quick call to action. If we go just to the next slide, and then we'll take questions. So if you are interested in the Yarra Solar program and getting a free, tailored, no obligation quote, please register on our website, our new website, www.yef.org.au. We've also got a 100% accredited green offer there to look at. So do check that out. And we're looking at some expression of interest of people in Yarra who are interested in community batteries. We are investigating options for that. So if you would like to learn more, please register with us on our website. As well, we're looking at aggregating our business community too to purchase cheaper renewable energy kind of collectively en masse. So it'd be really exciting if you can share that with all your friends and family. Mel?
Excuse me. Thanks, Pete. And thanks, Paul. We have had most of the questions answered through the Q&A function, which is fantastic, through all of our helpers from the 3 organizations, but I will go through a couple more. We've had 2 people ask about cleaning. One person has said, I've had conflicting advice about whether I should clean my panels and they're not very accessible. Should I, and can they just be wiped clean, or is there a specific cleaning regime where I would need a contractor?
Is that up to me?
Sure, Paul.
Yeah, good. All right. So look, one of my pet hates in all areas of life is so-called advice that comes from either vested interests or advice that doesn't need to be said, right? Or advice that's inaccurate and not specific enough. So we have installations, right, that Enviro Group did 12 years ago now in Brunswick at the Westwick Community Eco Village that are 2 stories high. They are 40 degrees pitch, and they've never been touched again by anybody, except for birds. I've inspected those systems myself, and each one of them is working as far as kilowatt hours a day more than the initial quote said that they'll work, right? Because when you quote a system according to Clean Energy Council guidelines, you include some future loss for dusting and debris, right? So the answer in that instance is that if they don't get cleaned, they're fine. No problems whatsoever. As for whether you should clean them, right, and should's always a loaded word, well, of course, if you can get to your panels safely, if you notice that there's a drop in performance and you need to look at your inverter for that, and that's pretty easy, The average month, in fact, coincidentally, is October, coming up next month. If you've got systems and you want to check how much your system makes in October and compare that to your initial quote or the last year's October, and they're making a lot less, you might need to clean them, right? But the word, should you clean them? Well, I don't think you have to. Do you need to? You don't need to under the terms of any warranty or anything like that. But if you want to, and if they look dirty, by all means, go ahead. Now, cleaning regime, look, there's no special liquids that I know of that you need to use at all. It's just going to be dust and smog and smoke that's up there. Mild detergent works well. You can buy solar specific stuff that will probably not leave the film up there. You do need to be careful that you don't slip and fall off, which is why you might want to use a contractor. But no, there's no qualification required to do it. None of our material says you have to do it. And a few years ago, solar panel cleaning companies popped up. And of course, they will say that you should do it because they're a solar panel cleaning company. And, you know, why not?
Thanks, Paul. Well, we've almost run out of time, so I'll leave it at that for the Q&A. We have had most of the questions answered in the Q&A function, but if your question was not answered or you still have further questions, you can see there's a wealth of knowledge here with the team at YEF and the team at Enviro Group, so please get in touch with them if your question wasn't answered afterward. Sam, could we have the next slide, please? And thanks. So thank you all for coming tonight. We hope you learned a lot about going solar, and hopefully you've gotten inspired to follow up with the Yarra Energy Foundation and get a quote for solar on your home or business. And I'd like to extend a big thank you to our speakers, Pete Mercurio of the Yarra Energy Foundation and Paul Blackman of Enviro Group.
Thanks, Mel.
So, yep. For more information, please visit the Yarra Energy Foundation's website to find out more about the Yarra Solar Program. And you can also visit Yarra City Council's website to find out more information about living sustainably in Yarra. We also have another Q&A webinar session coming up next Thursday, in which you can learn practical ways to transition away from gas to an all-electric home and be part of a movement to create a zero-emissions future and also make the most of your solar. This Q&A will follow on from a webinar we had a couple of weeks ago about the why, how, and when of transitioning from gas to an all-electric home. So you can also watch a recording of this webinar on our website. You'll have an email in your inbox at the end of the session, which includes the links that are on this slide, as well as a quick survey, and we'd love to have your feedback on this session. Have a great evening, and we hope to see you all again at another of our Climate Action Series webinars soon.